We're live. Good to see you, Paul. How have you been?
I am doing awesomely today, Tyler. Thank you for asking.
Excellent.
No, it's great to be back. I know we were just having a little bit of a chat off air there about what we're going to talk about today, but I'm just really excited. It feels to me like we're really gaining even further clarity on this coaching path formula that we've been working on and putting together. And yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation today. I think, this is an opportunity for us to start really thinking about how this can be applied to, the identity of showing up as a coach and a business owner and all that type of stuff. So I'm super excited about this chat today. How are you today, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm just responding to what your thoughts were there. One of the things that we've prescribed to is, taking the first step and not needing to know what the subsequent steps will be, and trusting that once we take the first step, that we're going to gain a new perspective, a new insight, and that's going to kind of illumine or reveal the subsequent step to take. And so, we don't have to have the whole thing figured out at the beginning. We just need to show up and to be brave and to commit to taking the first step.
Absolutely. I love what you said there. Not needing to know the first, not needing to know the subsequent steps. I would even take that a step further and make an argument around there is just no way knowing that we can know what the subsequent steps are going to be.
Yeah.
And that's the power of all this is, being clear, gaining clarity in what our vision is, making sure we are pointing in the right direction so we've got something to reference what we're doing against. But we don't know what we're going to create until we go through the process of doing the creating.
Absolutely.
Which is a powerful thing. It's this constant process of taking an action, reflecting afterwards, really getting curious about what happened, what worked, what didn't go to plan, and what's the lesson. And it's only there where the next step is illuminated.
That's right. Yeah.
We just can't know. And it's a powerful thing to recognize that it's it's moving away from needing certainty on how things are going to pan out to, this is the process of developing that trust and inner certainty that whatever happens, we've got it. We've got what it takes to do this step and the next step and the one after that, whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
We've got everything we need to be able to just keep this momentum going and making strides. And, for me, one thing that's, just this process of what we've been doing over the last couple of months is a fantastic example of that for me. We both probably jointly together had a vision of where we might be at the end of this year. And it's, we couldn't have imagined where we are right now, I don't think, at that point in time. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a really good example and a good reminder to, just keep coming back to that idea that I just need to know what my next step looks like, know what the actions I need to take are, be disciplined and dedicated to take those actions. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I'm kind of reflecting on why do we have the tendency to want to know what all the subsequent steps are, like, and as you were speaking, I was reflecting on the fact it's a bit of a protection mechanism. It's like we want to protect ourselves in knowing what all the steps are so that we don't fail or we don't get hurt. And really what it is we're trying to find certainty on the outcome. We want to know all the steps to take in order to get a specific result. And, that is what actually stops us from taking the first step, because we can't foresee what all the steps are in order to get a specific result. All we can do is have a vision of what it is that we want to create. And that is your guiding light. That's all you need to be clear of, what your vision is. and each step will present itself to you, and you just have to show up and take that step. And then once you take that step, then the next step will present itself to you, and so forth. So that's the path that we're following, right?
Yeah. What's coming to mind for me is, what do I actually want to be doing? I know it can be scary doing new things and taking the path of the new, the adventurous, but what do I want to be doing? I'm imagining myself if I'm, even taking the dog out for a walk. Do I want to walk the same path that I've walked for the last 3 months, day after day? Do I want to take that path that I have certainty on? Or do I want to take a brand new path, somewhere I've never been before, where I can't know what's around the next corner? And, for me, it's just much more exciting to be trying new things. I think, there is a tendency to think down the negative path. There's that survival instinct. We want to make sure that we're not going to be in too much danger. I think that's where a lot of this fear and needing to protect ourselves comes from. But what if we can put a slightly different spin on that? I'm just looking at that slide saying the coaching path. I'm imagining this path that I've never walked down before. It's a brand new path that I'm tackling, and every step is a new and exciting step. We don't know what is around the next corner. There may be danger, but we have to trust ourselves to be able to overcome and deal with anything that comes across that path.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity just to flip that around a bit and really look at it as an exciting opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 There's lots we can dive into there. There's things that are, coming up as you speak. So a lot of the obstacles are inside of ourselves. So we take that step into the unknown, and it's the feelings of uncertainty that we're not used to, that we're not comfortable with, that we're wanting to avoid. And this kind of stems and connects back into the comfort zone. We kind of revert back into the old way, into the safe way. And meanwhile, our aspirations, our soul suffers as a result, because we're not staying true to that deeper cause and inspiration, our deeper purpose that we've come here for. So, so this is what the live coaching path is all about. And as we've been discussing, Paul, in the past few months, is the first and foremost of the live coaching path is identity. And really, so far, we have established the authentic self, the authentic identity, who we really are underneath the different roles, the various roles that we have to fulfill in our day-to-day lives as parents or spouses or business owners and so forth. But in terms of being a coach, in terms of developing a thriving business, if that is your vision to, have a coaching practice, have a coaching business, have all the things that you feel, the fulfillment that will come as a result of that, the freedom and so forth, then there's just a few identities that we must be very clear about. And I think every one of us must have in order for our vision to become fulfilled. And so, and I would say that, Paul, nobody who doesn't have this desire to be a coach is really following us anyways. They're not really interested in our message and what we're trying to say. They're not interested in the live coaching path. First and foremost, they do have a vision to be a coach, a life coach, any kind of coach. And that's essential. That's necessary. Without it, there's no first step. There's no next step. What are your thoughts on the identity, the necessity of having this desire and to be a life coach. I mean, without it, how far are you going to get?
Yeah. I think, if I think to anyone who might be attracted to our message and the listeners out there and, the coaches who are at various different stages in their coaching journey, from that very first moment where, for the very, very first time we even become aware of what a coach is and, a seed might be planted and we move on to thinking, maybe this is something that I might be interested. We might move into some education. This can be a really long timeline, all the way through to the end to that point where you feel like you're a successful coach with a successful business. There's many, many different points in between, but where's the point in time in that whole journey? Where's that point in time where you think, oh, hang on a sec, I've done enough to be able to identify as a coach? And what does that even mean to identify as a coach? I think is a powerful, interesting question to think about. I think that there is a necessity at some point, for us to be able to have conversations and for us to be able to get to a place where we're having, people weighing up, joining us in a journey together, partnering together. If we're going to start having those type of conversations, those people are most likely going to have to feel themselves that at some level that we are a coach that can help them with their challenges and through the journey. So they need to feel that we're the coach. But where's the point that we feel that? And there's many, many different avenues that I could approach into diving into this, but I feel, many of us, and I was definitely in this bucket for quite a long time. There was a period of time when I had this desire and vision to become a coach. But in my mind, it was a point in the future sometime where, one day I'm going to be a coach and I can do the things that I want to do. And reflecting back, it's actually weird. I don't know when that point was that I made the decision, but there was a point in time when I said to myself, I'm going to stop looking at what everyone else around me is doing. I'm going to just focus on some of this inner work myself. And, it might have been a little bit more unconscious, but really starting to think about who I am and what I've got to offer. And, really starting to build that self-belief and confidence in myself that I am enough to be able, I don't need to wait to be something else. We can decide at any point in that timeline that I mentioned earlier that, we are enough right now to be able to help people in our lives, to make progress in their own lives. And, I think this is just a really interesting piece of the puzzle that needs to come together for us to get to that place where we can identify as having a successful coaching business and to be a successful coach, whatever that even means. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Tyler. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, as you were speaking, I, was listening and, so the desire to be a coach, when, like I was thinking for myself, what was the time frame? And I've shared this before. And the desire to be a coach for me, I clearly remember the day. I clearly remember where I was, but it wasn't necessarily a conscious, I want to be a coach. The desire was, I've received something that has filled my bucket, if you will, has filled me up. I'm like, I was in such a state of gratitude and joy and excitement and fulfillment. Like, it was a moment that it's like, all of the clouds parted and like the sun was shining for me. And it was in that moment that I wanted to share that experience with others, because I knew prior to that, I knew what the challenges were. I knew what the obstacles were for me to get from where I was, which was really searching and seeking for something in my life. And I wasn't sure what it was. But really, we talk about things like freedom and happiness. We talk about gaining recognition of our true authentic self and our true self-worth. And all of those things I had received. And it was at that moment that I wanted to share it with others. I wanted others to receive the same fulfillment and experience that I had. So, but it's taken a long time for me to go from just having the desire or the vision to be a coach to actually taking a tangible action steps towards actually, setting up a business and attracting clients, paying clients as a life coach, announcing to the market that I'm a life coach. So there was a long gap in between. But I guess for me, the reason why we're starting with the identity and the live coaching path is because, this message is for those that can empathize and relate to what it is that we're talking about, to what I just shared, that there's a part of them that has that same desire, or there's a part of them that is seeking for something, but they're not sure what it is that they're looking for. And, the identity is actually what it is that we're seeking first and foremost. And coach is a coach is a worldly identity. It's something that comes after you recognize that deeper part of yourself, who you really are, because that is what empowers you to be an authentic coach. When you know who you are, when you have certainty in your true authentic self, then you can embody that in your coaching practice and business, and you can establish relationships with clients based on that identity, based on your inner identity as the authentic self and as a life coach. And there's lots of other steps we'll get into, Paul, the education, in order to gain the certainty and the confidence of that, hey, I can actually, conduct a hour-long coaching session and clients can actually benefit from it, and I can feel good about getting paid for it, like I'm actually helping them and I'm delivering on my promises. There's a lot of steps that are involved. But first and foremost, that desire and that vision to be a coach, to want to help and serve others, I think is, for me anyways, it's an essential. I wouldn't be here talking to you today if that wasn't the most important thing at my core.
I completely agree. Absolutely. And I think, that's potentially shining a light on one of the challenges. If we're not certain on our vision first and foremost, it's going to be really difficult to identify or to find a way to be able to identify something that we're not, so passionate about achieving at that deeper level. It's a powerful thing. I guess.
What I'm curious, you said you weren't entirely sure, but I'm just curious, when do you remember like the first time that the thought entered your awareness of, hey, maybe I want to be a coach? Do you remember that?
I do remember. I remember clearly as well when I decided to, this is what I want to explore. But it was the vision that I remember. I remember making that decision to solidify that vision. And I jumped down that rabbit hole of, finding out more information about, what it might look like. And the way that it came about for me is, I was certain, I had certainty on a couple of the elements that I was looking for. I wanted to be doing something that I could do for myself, have a bit more flexibility with my hours, to be able to spend more time with my family, that freedom side of things. I knew my strengths, and coaching in my previous corporate world was a huge part of that. And seeing people progress, I knew the things that provided me enjoyment and satisfaction. And I had actually hired a coach myself, so I was working with a life coach. And I don't know if subconsciously, there was definitely no conscious thought at that point. Maybe this is something I'd like to explore. But it was probably about 8 weeks into working with a coach. My coach actually planted the seed to me. He actually said, have you considered, maybe exploring this? And he planted a seed, and I got off the phone and I was talking to my wife about it, and I'm like, and it grew instantly.
So do you know why you hired the coach in the first place?
Well, because I had uncertainty in what I was going to do next. I was thinking, I had, as I mentioned, a few elements that I was certain on.
Right.
But in my mind, I was like, do I go down that e-commerce store route? I was looking at all different options. But yeah, it was really because I was uncertain in what I was looking to do. I went through that process of, working with a coach. And, clearly ever since I've been passionate about both developing my skills as a coach, as well as, seeking my own. Well, I see myself as being always someone who's going to embrace, being able to learn the lessons from, people who are above me in terms of the hierarchy of, where they might be, or, have skills that I think I can benefit from. But just creating that space to be able to work things through myself has just been invaluable throughout my whole journey. So yeah, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So that started with the seed, the vision, right?
Yeah.
That, hey, maybe that because you already kind of had like an underlying sense for, you were looking for something, and you had a vague idea of what you were looking for, and what you hired the coach for was to get clear about what it actually was. And so once that seed was planted and you had, hey, maybe, and then you started exploring it, then in order to be a life coach, what were some of the first things that you needed to do? And I'm imagining that there was some education involved.
And that's the interesting question, because I am someone who's probably naturally out of myself in some ways. For me to be able to call myself a life coach, I need a fair bit of evidence to support that idea.
Right.
I know we don't need to be formally qualified and there's no formal education, but I needed a certificate of some description before I could even consider calling myself a life coach. I needed to be coaching. There was obviously some element of practice coaching and all this type of stuff, but I couldn't internalize, really embodying the idea that I was a life coach until, then I was thinking, I kept on moving the boundary. Actually, I needed to get my first paying client. But then I got my first paying client. It was only a very small, I was a friend of a friend, and it was a very small amount. And I'm like, well, that's not really getting paid. I need to determine my value and worth, and I need to be being paid that. I need others to recognize my value before I can call myself a life coach. And, as I said, it's a difficult it's a difficult reflection to look back at that point in time when I really embodied the idea that, because it's an internal feeling, it's an internal state. I think, coming to that place where you go, I am enough to do this. It's actually not my decision. It's not my decision whether I'm a coach that's being paid to do what I am doing. It's the people that are, the people that I'm been so lucky to work with. It's each and every one of them has made a decision to come and work with me. But before that could happen, I had to get to a place where I believed that myself, because if we don't believe it, if we don't truly believe it, others out there aren't going to believe that either.
So here's I just want to interrupt because we use this word believe, okay? And to be honest, I'm not a fan of the word believe.
Yep.
Okay. And what I want to shine a light on here is what you said was, I needed to feel it. This is the first power. So once you felt it, then it was part of the actualization process, right? Oh, now that this feeling has come from within me, feel that I am actually, and so we're labeling it as I believe it now. But the belief,
I think it comes from beliefs though, because
but the belief came from the feeling.
Yes, but that feeling came from deliberately choosing what beliefs I want to find evidence for. Because I still, right to this very day, 5-6 years down the track, if I want to find evidence to support the belief that I'm not enough, I don't have the skills, there's people out there that won't, they're not going to resonate with me. Who am I to, if I want to find evidence to support that, I can probably find it.
What I'm saying is, at a deeper level, the head may be giving you lots of evidence, but if you don't feel that all that evidence is true, at a deeper level, I feel that I am a life coach and that I am ready. That feeling has to be there. And you can try to talk your head. People could try to convince you otherwise. People may have lots of evidence for you that you aren't. But what's that?
People will never change your belief.
What I'm saying is, it's the feeling that causes the belief. It's not the belief that causes the feeling. Although
I would disagree a little bit on that, only because for me, that was my experience, because I was supporting this belief that I'm not enough.
Right.
It was a deliberate choice to really embody the idea that I am enough.
Yeah.
And to start finding evidence to support that. And that's where that embodiment came from.
It's just linguistics, because what you keep calling belief, you didn't feel that you were enough.
Yep.
And the thoughts were supporting the feeling.
Mm.
You didn't feel that you were enough. The thoughts were supporting the feeling. Okay. Once you felt that you were enough, then all of a sudden the thoughts start to confirm and support that you are enough. But and so this is important, Paul, because this is a live coaching path. And we're saying that the first power, the underlying first and foremost, is feeling. And that's how people respond. If you don't feel like doing something, people can have all the best reasons in the world. But you may not even argue with those reasons. They may make great sense to you. I believe what you're saying is true, but I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I do 100% agree with everything you've said there, but
okay.
I do want to stress that I still could be, right now, not taking action because I'm still trying to find evidence to support this old belief that I used to hold so closely. And it was a protective mechanism. Yep. It was
sure it was.
It was choosing to stay in my comfort zone.
Yep. But again, the protection mechanism was because you didn't want to feel certain things.
Yep.
That's what you're protecting. You're protecting yourself at an innermost emotional level.
Mm.
That's what you're protecting. So again, because normally we work from the outside in. So from the outside in, the world determines what we think. What we think determines how we feel. What we feel determines how we are.
I would agree.
I don't feel I'm good enough. Guess what? I'm not good enough. However,
Mm.
from the inside out,
Mm.
when we go to who we actually are, not based on what we see in the world, not based on what we think, not based on what we feel, when we turn the whole thing around and start from the innermost cause, then we realize who we are, and that from there, your feelings now are in alignment with that. They support that.
Yeah.
Out of those feelings, the thoughts, out of those thoughts, the actions.
Mm.
This is the transformation from instead of the outside in, from the inside out. And the only reason why I'm making this point is because this has taken me decades to clarify within myself. Because when I first started out, it was the mind that was creating my feelings, and it was my feelings that created who I was. That's how it first started out. And I became conscious of that. That's what was happening through the practice of self-inquiry and meditation, which are the primary practices for realizing your authentic self, who you really are. Okay. Once I understood that, then all of a sudden there was a shift. There was a reversal. It's like, and this, when we allow the external to determine and dictate who and what we are, then we have nothing. We're just at the whim of whatever blows across our awareness. We can't control anything.
Yep. And that, what you're saying there, is a critical part of this. It is learning to be able to experience the external stimulus and the triggers and all this type of stuff, but be able to just be with whatever comes up. Because, a huge part of this work is, it's moving away from this desire and need to stay comfortable and protect ourselves, because this growth that we're wanting to move towards, to be able to get to a place where you completely identify as a successful coach.
Yeah.
It does not come from playing it safe. And really having a think about who we are. If we are, if we've got this vision, if it is so important to us, it almost comes back down to not what are we going to do, what are we going to sacrifice to be able to, start making progress. And part of that sacrifice is the feeling of being comfortable all the time, because we know that it's not always easy. We know we need to lean into some of this fear, and we need to, we need to get to the other side.
We need to give our fear about fear, right? You know that saying? I was thinking of that the other day. There's a famous quote: "There's nothing to fear but fear itself." It's like we're afraid of being afraid, And so that's the first start. Stop being afraid of your fear, And that's what's going to allow you to step into the uncertainty and the unknown. And it's like learning. So anyways, this is exciting. It's a heated, passionate conversation. We got two Leos. We got two passionate Leo coaches having a great conversation. So anyways, just to summarize this, coach identity is essential. Without it, without the desire, without the vision, without the mission, without the goals, it's never going to happen. It's got to start from inside first. You have to have that vision. The next identity. So, Paul, let me ask you, in your journey. So you went through the process of getting educated in terms of feeling that you're qualified as being a coach, And then once you now are starting to, okay, you're going out into the marketplace and you're trying to build a business as a coach, right? Because you're self employed now all of a sudden, right? Uh, Now, is this not the next identity that you had to embrace?
Yep. And this is, this is something that, this is something that is a critical distinction to make in our coaching journey. All of our coaching journeys. If we want to be able to identify as a coach, and we want to be a coach, and we want to be regularly showing up as a coach, we need to find a way to be able to do our coaching. For some of us, it may be voluntary. For some of us, it may be working as an employee for somebody else's business. But included in and incorporated in that vision that we have for ourselves, for most of us wanting to be coaches, is the freedom, the excitement, the moving away from being the employee to starting our own business. And that distinction that if that's our vision, if we don't find a way to be able to create a successful business, then we're not going to be able to get to do the coaching that is so important to us. And they're completely different. They're completely different things. We need to show up in completely different ways to embody being a successful business owner and being a successful coach. And often there can be conflicts in those two ways of being, those two ways of thinking. The big challenge, I'm just thinking about this right now, actually, that one of the big challenges that we have becoming a coach and going through this journey is that we've spoken about we just had quite a passionate conversation about, the identity of becoming a coach. That alone is something that is, such an involved process to work through. But not only do we have that, we've got this other thing that we're trying to get going at the same time. And for a lot of us, I was lucky enough to have an opportunity where I could have a bit of space to embody this. Largely there was some pressures there that I can go into if maybe another time. But for most of us, there's there might be financial pressures, there's time pressures. If there's any of us out there that are currently working full time to pay the bills and then trying to start a side business on the side, how do we find time to do everything that needs to be done? It's just an interesting thing. When I reflect back on just having sales conversations, a sales call is very, very different. A sales call I look at as being a requirement of this running a successful business. It's kind of separate to a coaching call, but it's a key element in bringing people into our business. So these two identities, they're intertwined in so many ways, very, very different. We need to bring ourselves, there's different skill sets that we need to develop, different obstacles in the way, different resistance, both equally as important as each other, though, I think. And if we think about the destination that our vision is trying to take us to, both of those things have been fully embodied, and we're comfortable. If you think about that destination, you think about that successful coach that we're sort of looking up at, aspiring to become. They're comfortable in who they are as a person. They're comfortable as who they are as a coach. They're comfortable in who they are as a business owner. They trust their processes and systems. They're comfortable. They've got so much certainty in themselves that they're very, very comfortable making offers. They're completely okay with the external result that might come back. Yes, no, yep, I'd love to work with you. No, not at this time. They're very much okay with their way of being and their way of showing up. And, that's what we've got to start working. Well, that's what we want to try and start to work towards. But the challenge we have is, how do we keep showing up and facing our resistance every day? I think is the interesting thing to think through, because, as we've kind of alluded to, there is so much going on for us as new coaches. Getting our head around coaching itself. What does a successful business even look like? Like, who knows? It's we go through our coaching training and they, typically show us everything we need to know, or the information we need to know on how to be a coach. But this is a different thing altogether. I certainly didn't get too much training in terms of, how to run a successful business. This is something that has been an experience, and I've, grown to love every single minute of it. It's a fantastic opportunity. I've learned so much more over the last 5 years than I have in the 20 years I when I worked in the corporate world working for someone else. It's been a fantastic experience. But it's got its challenges, and we just need to find a way to just keep showing up.
When did you embrace, which identity do you think you embraced first, the coach identity or the entrepreneur identity?
The coach identity. Yeah.
Okay. And so for me, it wasn't until I embraced, because I'm the same as you. Like, I had the coach identity a long time ago, but it wasn't until I embraced the entrepreneur identity as a coach that I actually became a coach. For me, I was already a coach in my identity, what I wanted, what my vision, but until I started being an entrepreneur as a coach, and that's how you and I met. I wasn't a coach in terms of like I had set up a business as a coach, and I had clients as a coach, and my invoices were coaching invoice. That all came after I embraced the entrepreneur identity. And I think that the entrepreneur identity, I think a lot of people are kind of attracted to the idea of being an entrepreneur and the idea of being a coach. I think, like you and I are started with the identity of coach first, but I think there's a lot of people that like the idea of being an entrepreneur.
You asked the question, which one did I embody? My vision for many, many, many years, as long as I can remember, is the entrepreneurial vision, way before the coaching vision came into place.
Okay.
But I knew in my heart that I wanted to be self-employed, doing my own thing.
Right.
I knew that. But even though that's been a longer term vision,
yeah,
I found it much easier to embrace the coaching identity.
Yeah, but you didn't know what you were going to be an entrepreneur as. It wasn't until you figured out that you were going to be a coaching entrepreneur.
Yep.
Like that's why you went. So in my mind, let me see if I'm correct here, but you already knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur when you hired the coach to help you. You just didn't know what kind of an entrepreneur. You didn't know if it was e-commerce. You didn't know what, right?
I would, it's not quite that, because for a couple of years before that, I was self-employed. I was working as a mortgage broker. I wasn't doing coaching, but I was doing something different. And,
right.
From the outside looking in, people would look at that as being quite successful. There was dollars coming in. There was clients that I was working with that were happy with the services that were being provided. Successful, but
you didn't think yourself as an entrepreneur though at that time, did you?
Well, in some ways, self-employed, absolutely. Entrepreneur, like even now, right now, the identity of an entrepreneur very much feels like it's still a work in progress. And I think,
yeah,
maybe that's a benefit.
I agree.
Maybe that's, part of the thing that gets me up every day doing what I need to do. I'm not necessarily looking at that as a positive or a negative. But it's back to this question, of what needs to happen, or where do we need to be before we can say that we are an entrepreneur? What does that mean to us? What does the entrepreneurial identity? And I think, from my point of view, I think it's not relating to it as a label. I don't want to relate to it as a label. I actually want to relate to it as a way of being. For me, an entrepreneur is this, constantly thinking outside the box, continuous improvement, developing systems and processes, all that type of stuff, improving my ability to show up as a coach is somewhat incorporated in this whole entrepreneurship thing. Thinking about what my next projects might be. I think it is this evolving thing that I just want to embrace. I want to embrace the identity of being a lifelong entrepreneur. I don't want to have to go back to being an employee. Is pretty much where this sits with me.
Right.
I'm interested to ask you that question. What does that identity or label entrepreneur mean to you?
Well, it's so funny because like I started more or less in business for myself in my early 20s. So I've been at it for 30 years. But, and there has been many throughout that whole time where I've kind of got business ideas. Okay. But to actually be an entrepreneur, it's a different thing than just having business ideas. Actually being an entrepreneur. So at the identity level, it's so fascinating because there's different levels. Like at the identity level, I would agree with you that I haven't fully embraced being an entrepreneur, but I think that you and I are working on that right now. I think that you and I have confidence and certainty in our coaching ability. And I think what we're working on through Life Coach Live and the live coaching path is our ability to be entrepreneurs. Would you agree with that? Or
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I look at myself as, this is a really interesting one for me, and it's probably only the last 6-12 months. I'm very comfortable with the label and identity of being and calling myself a successful coach.
Right.
Because I look at, I've got a business that's paying my bills. I've got a system that is regularly and reliably bringing clients into my business. My coaching is just going from strength to strength. I'm getting regular clients that are, continuing to sort of come back and want more coaching. I'm getting referrals. I'm getting, all the indicators that I would have looked at the start of my journey are being ticked off.
Yeah.
But I think what we were sort of touching on there is maybe some of these labels, because that's, there's our identity and who we are,
Sure.
Our vision. But for us to be able to really resonate with some of these labels, like the coach, the business owner, the entrepreneur, it's on the other side of a certain amount of action that we've already taken.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's going to be really difficult for us to be able to resonate with these before we take any action.
Yeah.
And understanding exactly what needs to happen for us to be able to resonate with these labels. Like, I'm just thinking out loud now, even understanding how much we even need to resonate with these labels. Why do we need to resonate with these labels? Maybe it is just continuously knowing what our next step needs to be and continuing to take meaningful action towards these things. We could almost look at these labels as our vision. This is what we want to work towards, but what's that very next step? What's the next thing I need to commit myself to doing? And how do I want to be showing up to do these things? knowing that it's going to take me a step closer.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because you and I met through an entrepreneurial school for coaches. So you and I already considered ourselves to be coaches.
Yep.
But what we didn't consider ourselves to be was fully the identity of being an entrepreneur. We had an aspiration or a vision, right? And now we're in the process of fulfilling that vision. That's what we're working on. That's what we're passionate about. That's what we're challenging each other on, right? That's what we keep committing to and showing up to. And so a couple things that I've learned about what the word entrepreneur means is the two words that have come up for me in the process is being the creator, and the other one is communications. You know, I think prior to that, my idea of being an entrepreneur would be based on a business size, whether that's amount of people in the organization or not is not so much a matter of the amount of clients and customers and products and services and revenues. That's how that was my idea of what it means to be an entrepreneur. So in other words, the evidence would be if I had X amount of people under my umbrella working under the corporation, if I had X amount of revenues, if I had X amount of products and services, if I had X amount of clients, then I would feel again that I'm an entrepreneur. So it's again, we're looking from the outside to confirm how we feel on the inside.
It's interesting hearing you say feel like an entrepreneur, but entrepreneur isn't a feeling. So what is the feeling that you need to feel that you're an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing to think through, because what is the feeling?
I know. But but clearly it's either you feel like an entrepreneur or you don't. Even though entrepreneur isn't a feeling like sadness or joy or anger or whatever, but there's still this it's like this acceptance that this is what I am.
I think at some level it's a choice that we make. We decide at some point, yes, enough has been done.
Yeah, but I think what we're talking about is from the outside in, and I can try to convince myself as in my head as much as possible that I'm an entrepreneur, but until I feel like it,
but you need to believe it.
You could do all the talking in the world. All the talking in the world. I won't believe it unless I feel it. I won't.
Well, maybe you need to believe it before you feel it. Because that's kind of how I feel. I think I need to believe it before I feel it. I think. And maybe it's a chicken and egg type thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd say from the outside in. So we're reverting back to this previous passion part of the conversation. From the outside in, we look outside and we say, if I had the revenues, if I had the profit, if I had the products, if I had the services, if I had the people working for me, right? So that's from the outside.
If I can tick my checklist, I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay, so now my head says those are the support that's the supporting evidence that I'm an entrepreneur. But guess what? Guess what? What's imposter syndrome? You don't feel it. So even though the external is all the things that I thought would make me feel like an entrepreneur, I still don't. There's something inside that it's off, right? And so what we're working on from my perspective is, first of all, giving up all the labels and being, which is what we're going to get into next. This is good.
So what I'm hearing there is that conversation about showing up as a coach and showing up as an entrepreneur, I'm now envisioning they are the vision. That is what we want to move towards. But we need to believe in ourselves that we have the power to create these things, and just get started. Just figure out what that next thing we need to do is and make that move. Get into motion, get started. And
So I have a problem with belief, because one minute I could believe I can, and the next minute I believe I can't.
I think that's normal. I think it's we don't have to.
Well, it's normal, but I'm trying to exceed what I believe. I consider my beliefs, I don't care how great they are, they're still a limitation. They're still a boundary.
Yes, I think they can help us in the.
They definitely can help us. They definitely can work for us or against us, but that's the problem.
But I think that's where we have a choice. I think we have a choice to decide. I can decide I'm the type of, there's enough evidence to support that I make a plan and for whatever reason I'm procrastinate and I don't get to do the thing. So I could choose to look for evidence for that. I think owning and accepting that is part of me. So that is, I can believe that. And so I'm not trying to change it, and I can also support the belief that I can actually do everything that I put my mind to, and being determined and disciplined and courageous to not try and find the evidence of the one I don't want to build up. And I want to start finding evidence to support the idea that I am a doer, and I am someone who can do everything that's required to get me to being the coach and the entrepreneur that I dream about being one day. I've got this vision that I want to work towards. And that's where I think there is a choice. I could spend the next 5 years seeking out evidence to support the belief that I don't want to hold. But I think I need to own and acknowledge, yes, that is part of me. And I'm also capable of doing anything I want, but that's the one I'm going to try and build up. And eventually that gets to the point where that just outweighs the old belief. And I think that's the only way that we can actually change our beliefs. We can't just decide to change our beliefs. We can't. You can't convince me the sky's red and not blue. There is no way in this world that you can convince me of that.
Unless you're colorblind.
But you can't change my belief.
Oh, you see, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Belief, look, all of the conflicts in the world, all the wars in the world, all the religions in the world, okay?
It's because different beliefs are held.
Different beliefs, but it's beliefs. It's not the truth. Just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true.
No. I agree. I agree completely.
So, are you more interested in what's true than what I believe? Because one minute I believe one thing, and the next minute I believe the opposite thing, and then somebody else tells me something else and I believe something else. I just want to know what's true.
But do you change your beliefs? I don't think we change our beliefs. I think we look for, we've got conflicting beliefs in some ways. I could sit here and think I'm not enough, or I could sit here and say I am enough. And I think there's a choice to be made. I really do. I think there's a choice to be made to consciously decide that I'm not going to support this belief anymore. I'm going to move away from that. And when you asked earlier when I got to the point where I could call myself a coach, it's when I said, no, I'm not going to look for this. I'm going to move away from being the imposter. I'm not going to build up this belief anymore. And when I consciously started to seek out evidence to support the idea that, I am a coach. I'm working with clients. I'm getting paid. I'm successfully bringing people into a business. Once I could internalize that, then that outweighed the other belief.
That's what I'm saying. Your beliefs changed. You went from not believing you were a successful coach to believing you were a successful coach. And the only thing that changed was your belief.
Yes.
Nothing else changed.
No, because my identity changed at the same time. My identity, that was when I was at that point where I could say, I am a coach. And I think I needed to go through that process.
Once your belief changed.
Once that belief outweighed the other belief. So both those beliefs are potentially still there.
Yeah.
Both of them. I don't think they change. Our beliefs don't change, but how we perceive them. And
To me, thoughts that uh, we don't necessarily challenge.
Mm.
I think that beliefs, our thoughts actually limit us because our thoughts are saying you can do this or you can't do that. You should do. There's a lot of limitations on what you can and cannot do based on what we think. And our biggest problem that I've discovered is just because we think something, we automatically believe whatever it is we think. Just because it shows up here, we believe it.
No, and that's exactly what I'm getting at. I'm getting at we have a choice to. That's hitting the nail on the head for me, because we get the choice to question our belief, question our thoughts, and is that what I want to believe, or is that going to serve me? Is that an empowering thought, or is it something that's holding me back?
Yeah. You're using it as a tool. You're using
As a tool. Absolutely, it's a tool. Yep.
as a tool to get you from A to B.
Yes.
That's what you're using belief for.
And in my case, I think it worked. It worked in helping me to get to that point where I can identify as a coach. It really helped change that, that imposter syndrome feeling that I had. It changed that feeling to now where I can't even imagine ever thinking that I'm not good enough to show up as a coach.
Right.
And I think our thoughts and the way we manage our thoughts and the decisions we make about what we're gonna believe and what we're not going to believe, what we're going to find evidence for and what we're not going to find evidence for, I think they do play a powerful part and a powerful role in enabling us to get to this idea of the labels that we want to call ourselves. Because both coach, entrepreneur, all these things are labels. And I think if we do this inner work that we've been talking about, become really clear on who we are, what our vision is, thoughts and emotions. I just look at this as all part of that emotional intelligence part. It's understanding what thoughts do we want to take notice of, what thoughts do we want to just disregard, what thoughts do we want to question. I think it's a really interesting conversation.
So I'm going to come up with I'm going to present something where I feel like it applies to both of our perspectives. And I would say most people work from the outside in. And I would say from the outside in, the world affects how we think affects how we feel affects how we are. So I would say from that standpoint, that beliefs are, from what you're talking about, that beliefs are important to help you get from A to B.
Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, as a coach, having a vision to turn up as, to get to a place where we're a successful coach, successful business owner. We have a point A and a B that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
If we, I guess in my mind, if we completely do the inner work, start from the inside, we'll just let ourselves be, see what evolves and see what comes up. We might have a happy life. We might have everything that we could ever want. But if we do have this vision to move towards somewhere where we're not right now, I think there is a need to think through how we might best get ourselves there and look at some of the tools that we can use to our advantage. And now there is so much to this. There's, it is getting that balance right that is so critical, because we 100%, we want to enjoy the journey. It's not just about getting from A to B. It's the experience that we have along the way. So many different components and parts to this. But I think one of the key things that we need to identify is that for us to get from where we are now to having a successful coaching business and being a successful coach means we need to move away from being completely comfortable all the time. We need to lean into some of the discomfort that comes from moving from point A to point B.
All right. So we need to challenge. I'm gonna use the word because you're big on beliefs, and I'm going to say that we need to challenge our limiting beliefs. We need to challenge the validity of our limiting.
Absolutely. Yes. And we need to encourage the building up of our positive beliefs equally.
Certainly, it is better to become aware of your limiting beliefs, and to before you can. The first step would be to change it. And I went through, I would say, in my 20s. Now looking back, I actually went through the practice of becoming aware of my thoughts, which, see, I just call them thoughts, and at the time, whatever we think, we believe. So in truth, thoughts are synonymous with beliefs. I I don't differentiate them, but there is a way to have thoughts without believing, but you have to do inner work in order to be mindful of it. But the first step, so one of the things that I used to do, Paul, which is exactly what you're talking about, okay? So what it was for me is I'd be walking, and let's say I was feeling anxious about a client. Like I was walking, I was out fresh air, but I'm kind of like, And so I would think about the client, and I would say, well, what is my fear about it? My client doesn't want to pay me, or they don't think I'm good, or they want to use somebody else. So there, that you could say, but that was all driven from a feeling. I had to check in with my body first and say, why don't I feel good about this client? Like, what is it? And so then I had to take that feeling and say, well, and I had to put a thought to the feeling. Okay. And then once I saw the thought, I saw that it was like a negative thought, like a limiting thought. My client, okay. So then what I would do is I would literally affirm, like almost like an affirmation or a mantra repetition, the exact opposite. So if this is my practice, so I'm just sharing with you what I did. I'm not saying anybody else should do it. I'm just saying what worked for me, what I used to do. So if the thought was my client doesn't want to pay me for my work, then my thought as I'm walking, and I do it with my breath, my client values the work that I do and is happy to pay me for my work. And I would keep walking, and I kept repeating that. And from that standpoint, what ended up happening was the feeling changed. I wasn't carrying that kind of that yucky feeling, and it's funny, we're not really aware. Like if we check in with our body, we may not, because most of the time we're so locked in our head, we're not aware of how we feel. Okay. So, anyways.
I love that. And that's a good example of questioning the thoughts. Because I would be big for, thoughts aren't our beliefs. Thoughts could be any number of different things coming in my mind. But, I'd be big for questioning the thoughts. Is it a belief that I hold? Is it a story I'm telling myself? What's going on? What is actually going on? What are the facts that this constant chatter going on all the time? I think, having the ability to be able to question what is actually popping up, knowing that we aren't our thoughts, and we have this ability to be able to, ask the question, what is the belief that I want to hold on this? And I think what you've done there is exactly that. In some ways, it's, deciding that, I am worthwhile and I am enough and my client does value my work. I think that's a powerful thing to reinforce.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just happy not feeling, because I think the feeling was representative of an unconscious belief. So that negative feeling that I had was representative of an unconscious belief, but I was not conscious of what the belief was. So I had to investigate, why am I feeling this way, in order to see what the unconscious belief was. Once I saw what the unconscious belief was, then I would transform it into literally the opposite. Like, that was my practice. I would say, well, what's the complete opposite of that? And what I noticed was my feeling changed. For me, it wasn't even so much that I believed the affirming thought. Uh, it was just, I was affirming it as the truth. Like, my client is happy for me and is happy to pay me, right? Whether they actually are or not, it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's interesting. But that's interesting nonetheless that a change in thought changed the feeling.
It was because I was working from the outside in. But in order for me to see what the thought was, I had to check in with the feeling. I had to go beneath I wasn't even aware of the thought. It's fascinating that it's like it's like a two-way traffic.
Yep.
There's two-way traffic going on. Yeah. And so the inner work, there's definitely, we've got the conscious, we've got the subconscious, and we've got the unconscious. Right? And there's stuff that is going on deep inside of us that we're just unconscious of. We don't even know what's there. And it's usually only when we get put in a certain situation that the unconscious gets triggered and we become conscious. We have some emotional reaction or resistance or something like that. We didn't even, like, where the hell did this come from? Like, I'm all of a sudden just overtaken by emotion or whatever.
And that's why so much of this work is just building that awareness, just becoming as aware as we can of the things that we are experiencing and the resistance that we're facing, and keep circling back to these questions of who we really are and how we want to show up, and what that vision is that we want to move towards, and the power that can come from coming back to those questions can really help us in determining what that next step is going to be. And yes, I think there are times when the external does sort of flow back into that pattern, and maybe that is where our beliefs are sort of held in that sort of crossfire between trying to determine what it is that we want to achieve, and getting that feedback back from the reality of what's actually happening around us. It's an interesting thing to think through.
Yeah, I'm as you're speaking, I think our beliefs come from our unconscious conditioning.
Mm.
Most of us are completely oblivious to what we believe until we're faced with a situation, and then all of a sudden we act in that situation according to what our unconscious belief is dictating us to do. Anyways, there's lots more here, Paul.
I feel like this could go on forever.
We'll probably come back to it. I'm sure this will come back again because we're both passionate about it. But the final slide here. We've just to rehash so far, we've talked about the necessity of the two identities of being a coach, and then we talked about how the next identity is as an entrepreneur, or in your case, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur first, but you didn't know what kind of an entrepreneur. Is that, I don't want to be putting words in, that's what I thought we talked about.
I was just going to say, like, what comes up for me here is, we've got our visions, whatever they may be.
Mm.
We've spoken today about a vision of becoming a coach, becoming an entrepreneur. We have other visions as well. We want to be, we want to have our family, we want to be a good role model for our kids. There might be a number of other visions that we have. But what comes up for me in this slide really is, really circling back to the source. Where's it all come from?
Mm.
Where's everything we create actually start from? And I think this is the power of what we've been trying to get through, how we're going to show up, and, the work that we can do in terms of allowing us to really show up with the mindset that's required to tackle some of this. This is difficult stuff to work through potentially for a lot of us.
Mm.
That resistance is real. The fear is real when we're shaking almost because we're about to jump on a sales call, or we're nervous about actually putting our offer out there, or we're worried about what other people are going to think when we're about to post a video that we've created. These are real experiences that we need to work through, and just to be able to keep reinforcing that we have the power within us to be able to decide that these are the things that we need to do next, and to be able to show up with a mindset that allows us to be courageous and to work through our resistance. I think it's powerful, just reinforcing the idea that we have everything we need already. We actually don't need any more. To take that next step, we've got everything we need right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally concur with that. You've summed that up very nicely. That's ultimately our true identity, that we are, and don't let all the other fears and insecurities kind of stop you from being your true authentic self and fulfilling your vision and your mission and your goals. So
it makes it exciting for me. When I do go back to that inner source, there's a tendency from time to time to get wrapped up in our fears and worries and doubts, and to succumb to some of that resistance and to wonder how we're going to get ourselves through it. But being able to step back and come back to some of this stuff, it's almost a tool in itself in some ways. Just to be able to keep checking in with what's most important. To really enable us to get back on track as quickly as we can. And, that's part of the practice, I guess. But just, moving away from going through that process subconsciously, potentially, when we get knocked off center, we all know that we get knocked off center. And after a period of time, whatever that looks like for us, we're back and ready to try again. I think this is a tool we can use to really help us, go through that process in a bit more of a proactive way. Keep coming back, keep showing up, keep reinforcing that idea that we're enough and we've got everything that we need, and it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, some of the other words we use for source or power source, our true identity that we use in our ebook, the Live Coaching Path ebook, is creator. And so creator in the context of creation, whatever you want to create in your identity as an entrepreneur. So you're the creator of your vision, of your business. And the other term that we use for source is cause. And taking responsibility as a coach for being the cause of transformation, first and foremost in our own lives and in the lives of the clients that we serve. And that our vision is a particular effect that we want to impart on our clients. So it's been a great conversation, Paul. We're gonna get going here. Do you have any final parting wisdom for us?
Oh, I've enjoyed that conversation. It's I do find it interesting. We're coming to this from slightly different paths, where we're on our own slightly different journeys, trying to sort of put something together ourselves here, and it's fascinating seeing some of those slight differences in the way that we think sort of show up. But I think it just keeps coming back to these underlying principles that are so critical in terms of us making sense of what it is that we're actually here doing. Just the more we can understand about ourselves, whatever level we find ourselves at, or whatever level we're at, the more we know about ourselves, the more awareness that we can build, the more clarity we can get on what it is that we're actually wanting to work towards, and how we want to be showing up and committing ourselves to the actions that we're going to take. It's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I enjoyed this conversation as well, and I'm looking forward to having more Life Coach Live conversations with you, Paul.
Absolutely.
Okay, until next time.
Bye for now. We'll talk soon, Tyler. See you guys.
Likewise.